Welcome to this episode of the Digital Disruption Podcast. Today's guest is Howard Tursky. Now, Howard is an inspiring and passionate speaker, the founder and CEO of From, the digital transformation agency. He's also a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, innovation consultant, and serial entrepreneur. IDG have named him one of the top 10 digital transformation influencers to follow today, and Enterprise Management 360 named Howard one of the top 10 digital transformation influencers that will change your world. It's a great pleasure to have him here from across the pond, joining me all the way from the USA in New York. Howard, welcome to the Digital Disruption Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Brilliant. Well, Howard, may I first congratulate you on the book? It's a fantastic read, and I will recommend it to many people. Before I kind of get into the nitty-gritty, there's so much to get into in this book, and we're not going to be able to go through all of it. But first of all, just for the people watching and listening to this, I wondered if the first thing that you could do is perhaps just, the book provides a 5-step roadmap to all about sort of winning digital customers. I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about that framework and your objective for the book in terms of those sort of 5 sort of core bits of that roadmap.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm so gratified that you found the book that beneficial and interesting, and that you enjoyed it. And so, thank you so much for that. Yeah, what I really try to do with the 5 steps is, I recognize that many large companies are embarking upon digital transformation, and then it's challenging. And, there's so many statistics out there that show that a lot of digital transformations are not successful, or at least not fully successful, and many stats to support that are in the book from sources like Forbes and KPMG and others who've studied this. And so while it's clear that many companies are engaged in digital transformation, it's also clear that not everybody seems to be going about it in a way that's successful. I've had a real advantage, a real opportunity in my career. I've been working with large brands on digital transformations for just about 25 years now, which is amazing even to say. I can't believe it's been that long, but the calendar says that it has. And during that time, which really given me a ringside seat to scores of these digital transformation projects. And I've been involved in some that have been wildly successful, and I've been involved in some that have been horrible failures. And so if I combine all of that, all those observations, if you will, over several decades together, I've been able to start to see what are some of the patterns. What are the things that companies are doing when they tend to be successful? And what are some of the problems that they encounter? And what are the things that make them unsuccessful? And so the process of writing this book was in part to take all that knowledge and insight and see if I could put it into one step-by-step process to say, hey, when companies are successful at digital transformation, this is at least a path to success. I would never say there's only one way to be successful, but this is a way, and I can observe, and I've observed, and studies have shown there are many paths that don't work. So this is a 5-step process that has been proven to work, and I'm happy to just give you the quick overview of it, and then we can drill into any part of it that you like. But there's sort of three key steps that happen in serial, more or less, one after the other, and then 2 that happen in parallel with that. So the first 3 that start, the number one most important step that I talk about at great length in the book is to understand your customer. One of the biggest flaws that some companies have in the thinking about digital transformation is thinking that it's about technology. It's not really about technology. Technology is a vehicle. And what it really is about, at least for those companies that have seen business success from digital transformation, is creating a better value proposition for the customer. And so the first step is to make sure that you truly understand who your customer is, what their current points of pain are, what their actual experience is with your products and services, and identify those things that, if you can improve upon them, will really differentiate your product in the marketplace. And we go into great detail on how to do this, because there are many, many tactics, largely different types of research tactics, to make sure that you really understand the customer. But that's the first step. The second step is to map the journey. Understand what is the customer's current experience, and then what is the vision of a future customer journey experience that would substantially improve that value proposition to the customer, defining that vision, that North Star of the future. And that can be intimidating, because very often it can be quite different from where you are now. Some companies go through that process. We do a lot of workshops with companies, and sometimes there's this moment of panic where they realize that, yes, this is what we really need to be, but that's just such a distance from where we are now, it becomes a bit scary. And then the third component is to build the future. And what that means is taking that customer journey map, that vision that you've created for what the customer's experience should be, and starting to break it down and say, well, we've got to create a chatbot, we've got to create a machine learning tool, we've got to create a customer data warehouse, we've got to build a new app, whatever it is. Usually it's a whole bunch of different things. And for each of those things, to get really granular on what are the specific characteristics that each of those components have so they fit together to create that great journey. And we talk a lot in the book about design thinking, and I propose some enhancements or expansions to design thinking. I call it design thinking 2.0, which is really sort of some refinements to the thinking around design thinking that are specific for the digital world that we're in now. So those are kind of the top three steps, if you will. And while you're doing those three steps, there are two other things that are critical to do that kind of span the whole duration while you're moving through those three steps. One is to optimize the current. Digital transformation can be time consuming. It can take years to fully develop the vision and execute it. And that's not inappropriate, because very often it's transformation of a great level of ambition. But very often there are also things you're doing today that can be creating confusion, frustration, disappointment for your customers that can be fixed quickly. Low-hanging fruit, as people sometimes refer to it as. And so while you're doing the big visionary transformation, you need to be asking yourself, what can I fix each day, week, month, quarter to continue to make the experience better and better? And so I talk in the book about a variety of ways to really analyze and evaluate what you're doing now to find the quick hit improvements, which are very important, both to demonstrate to your organization that there's reason to believe to continue to fund something that's potentially a longer term, larger transformation. And secondly, to show improvements to your customers, because if you're disappointing your customers today, I'm not going to kid you, just by making a few improvements, you're not going to win their love, but at least you give them some reason to believe that you're headed somewhere in the future. And then the fifth step is to lead the change. And of course, you don't end with leadership. Leadership is arguably the first and most important thing. In the book, we talk about it last, only because I like people to understand first what is all the things that need to be done, and before we dive in and say, how do you lead that? But leading transformation requires special types of leadership skills. Because, for example, when driving transformation, you often face significant resistance to change. How do you identify all the different types of resistance to change that occur during transformations, and how do you overcome them? That's a topic that we spend quite a bit of time on in the book, as you know. And then there are other aspects of leadership of transformation, things like how to pitch digital transformation, or how to think about assembling the teams necessary for digital transformation. So that's the fifth parallel step that really happens the whole duration of the transformation process.
As we said at the start, there's a lot there, Howard, and thanks very much for going through. I'm going to dive into three of these sort of core topics here. And whilst I'd love to dive into all of them, as I said, that there's a lot there. But the first one I want to touch on is actually the deeper area, sort of area three of the area, which is you talked about customer journey mapping. So many listeners and people that watch this podcast have an idea of what customer journey mapping is. They'll have experience of doing that. However, something that stood out to me in the book, and it's something that resonated with me because it's something in my own consulting career and clients and organisations that I work with, I promoted too, was the emphasis that you put on shifting attention to outcomes and value creating behaviors, and specifically, before the process of ideation, because this is something that I've come across before that people don't do. And the question that I had is just to articulate this a little bit more detail was, look, why is it so important to focus on outcome? Why is it so important to focus on those, those value creating behaviors?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the proposed enhancements that we make to design thinking, which is a profound and enormously valuable set of practices. And design thinking sort of starts traditionally with the idea that you're going to empathize with the customer and then ideate and then test. Those are kind of some of the key steps in traditional design thinking. But it doesn't have within it the idea that, well, wait a minute, it sort of presumes the pre-existence of understanding why are you building a product at all? Yeah. And that's so important. And that has to drive everything that you do in business. The fundamental idea of business is to take money and make more money, right? I mean, that's any business that's been funded in any way understands that this is the function of a business, for better or for worse, right? I didn't create that model, but that is essentially what anybody running a business is responsible to do. And so if you're going to spend money, and digital transformation inevitably involves spending money, very often quite a lot of money, whether it's on labor or technologies or marketing and other things, you need to be able to say, well, wait a minute, I'm spending this money. What is supposed to happen that is going to make this a worthwhile investment? And when we think about the benefits that companies are looking for, of course, there's all kinds of different industries and all kinds of different business to consumer, business to business. But, when you boil it all down, almost every business has only a few ultimate goals: revenue, profit, growth, valuation. This is pretty much what I'm sure you could find an exception, but nearly every business is focused on. And so what is it that actually drives those things? Because you could say, well, those are the things that you ultimately want, but it's a little bit difficult to say, okay, I'm designing a product. How do I get this product to create more revenue? How do I get this product to create more valuation? Well, there's actually kind of a chain, like a series of dominoes. And what is it that creates that kind of value? What is it that generates more revenue? What is it that creates more profitability? Well, of course, a lot of things, right? But if you were to pick one thing that's sort of the number one thing that impacts your ultimate business goals, it's human behavior. And in particular, most importantly, customer behavior. If you can get your customers to do what it is you need them to do, things like buy your product or service, buy more often, tell their friends, don't return the product if you have a challenge or problem, right? Also, don't spend 10 hours on the phone with our customer support team because that costs money. So it's pretty easy typically to identify what are the value creating behaviors that you want from your customer. And you may also, by the way, have some value destroying behaviors. You don't want your customers to go leave 1-star review on Amazon. You don't want your customers to sue you, right? Things like that. If you can get this formula right, if you can create the right experience for the customer, where you create more value creating behaviors by the customer, man, you're going to be in great shape as a business. It's not the only thing that matters, but if your customers are doing all the things you want, it can cover a multitude of sins in other parts of your business. If your accounting system isn't perfect, or if there's some other, your employee management process or your onboarding isn't great. If your customers are doing what you want them to do, you're probably running a great business. And by the way, if your customers are not doing what you need them to do, then no matter how great your ERP system is, or whatever else you're doing in your business, it just may not matter. It's that important. So bottom line is, it seems like any transformation or product development effort needs to start with the question of what is it we need customers to do as the ultimate measure of success, and as a design principle to feed in and say, okay, my job as a creator of something, an experience, a product, an app, whatever it may be, is to create this thing such that when people interact with it, it generates this behavior.
And in terms of the mistakes that you see organizations making when they go through this, I mean, there's a couple that I can think of that spring to mind. Commonly for me, it's very much that they only involve a few people in this exercise of journey mapping and looking at those behaviors. They don't involve perhaps maybe an end-to-end team. That's definitely one that stands out to me. But for you, what are some common mistakes that you see organizations making, and how can they identify them and overcome them?
Well, let me build on the one that you just said, and I'll mention another one or two as well. I certainly agree with you that very often it's kept to a tight group of people, and that's such a waste.
Yeah.
Because creating there's a couple reasons why that's a big mistake. One is because you want the best possible answer, right? After all, if your goal is not to fulfill the creative vision of your chief marketing officer, right? That's not the goal. The goal is not to make the CEO think that what you've created is pretty, or make his wife feel that you've included the feature that she suggested, right? These are not really the goals. They may be valuable politically. I don't mean to diminish them, but ultimately the measure of success is customer behavior. And so we need to make sure that we understand what, well, here's the thing. Who in your company will understand what characteristics of a new product will drive that customer behavior. It's not an easy thing to figure out.
No.
So you need a variety of different types of expertise to do that. The first expertise you need are people that really understand the customer. So who within your organization really understands the customer? Well, if I were to bring together a group of people to come up with a journey map, very often what companies would do is bring together some senior and mid-level executives, maybe some top people in marketing, top people in product. So how well do these people understand the customer? Well, one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, he defines an expert at something as someone who spent 10,000 hours of their life doing it. If you've played tennis for 10,000 hours or practiced piano for 10,000 hours, whatever it is, it generally gets you to that expert level. So how many of the executives within your organization have spent 10,000 hours with customers? I'm going to suggest the number is probably zero. Yeah. There might be an exception, but probably zero. But how many people in your organization? Well, if someone's been with your company for 5 years or more and their job 40 hours a week is to interact with customers, whether that's on a shop, in a store, they're a security guard, they're in the call center, whatever it may be, those people are experts at your customers, what they care about, what they think, how they behave. So, good Lord, leverage their knowledge and expertise. You're just crazy not to. And yet so often I see that it doesn't happen. In addition, one of the things we talk about a lot in the book is just diversity. The different points of view. When you're trying to do ideation, the more different experiences that you can pull into it. Maybe you have somebody who's lived in another part of the world. Maybe you have somebody who's a single parent. Maybe you have somebody who grew up in a third world country or whatnot. All these things provide diversity of experience, which might lead to insights that the smaller group might not have. And then lastly, one of the biggest things we face when we're trying to drive change is resistance to change. And one of the techniques, and there's many, of trying to get people more accepting of a change you're trying to drive is if they feel some ownership over it. They feel that they were part of its creation. So every time you involve more people into the process, you have more people who feel like they're sort of parents, if you will, co-creators of that change, which tends to give you more allies when you're trying to drive that change.
It definitely does. And I guess to add some of the points there that you just made are all excellent. And there's lots of value here for people watching and listening. One of the things I just jotted down there was when you think about that end-to-end interaction and that diversity that's required, it's really important, therefore, for especially executives to recognize that this is actually the invitation to reorganize the business in a particular way. You need to reorganize the operating framework to allow these people to collaborate and not be in silos anymore. And I think that, on that particular piece about, that journey mapping, that's such a crucial step.
Well, absolutely, because one of the key reasons we have journey maps is to have a way of cutting across silos.
Yeah.
Organizations tend to be built in silos for some legitimate reasons, right? It does make sense that you have to, when you think about the magnitude of what has to happen at a large company, I don't know of a better way of getting it done than to breaking it down into teams. You have a marketing team, an operations team, a product development, and then within marketing, you break it down. These people are going to work on email. These people are going to work on ads, whatever. I don't know of a better way to do that because it's hard to get a whole company to just work together without structure. But as beneficial as that structure is, it, of course, like most things in the world, has pros and cons. And one of the downsides, of course, is if you have different people thinking about different parts of the customer journey, this team is thinking about the email marketing, and this team's thinking about the shopping process, and this team's thinking about the product fulfillment process, and this team's thinking about the support process, then it can wind up feeling disconnected. Just like, if we were decorating a room together in my house and you worked on the wallpaper and I worked on the furniture and someone else worked on the floor and someone else got the paintings and we all just did what we thought would look great, it might not come together as that nicely decorated of a room, So you need some method to help these individual silos create a common vision. And the journey map is a way of saying, look, this is how we want the customer's experience to flow from step to step. But of course, you need all those different parties, all those different silos to participate together and seeing what their part looks like and understanding how their part connects to what's before it and what's after it to create a seamless and a consistent feeling journey throughout.
Most definitely. I'd like to talk now about optimizing for the short term, which is the fourth step in your 5-step roadmap. And many large brands and enterprises still focus and waste huge amounts of time, effort, and indeed, therefore, money, ultimately on focusing on big, large programs of work. Now, big, large programs of work are important. At the end of the day, you mentioned earlier about there's a big vision that's got to be achieved. But they don't necessarily realize value quickly. And I see this time and again where organizations spend so much time not sort of optimizing necessarily for the short term. But my question here is look, how can organizations go about optimizing for the short term, and what should they be doing? I mean, you touch on this really well in the book, and I'd like to expand upon that.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of tactics. I'll tell you, maybe I'll mention two of my favorite. One is observational analysis. Very often, there are points of pain that customers experience in our current existing touch points, our current customer journey, right? The first is to understand what is the customer's actual journey today, not the theoretical journey that you imagined when you created the apps or websites, whatever. But if you actually watch customers using your experiences, whether that's in a store, how many customers walk into your store and are confused about where to go? How many customers are struggling to figure out which cashier line will be the fastest? How many customers get to pay and realize that their coupons are expired? How many customers, are confused about the difference between product A and product B and can't figure it out? These are all examples of just moments of pain, frustration, or friction in the journey, the experience that customer has. And so it may be that some of those things are only solvable through broad transformation, but very often there are ways to improve upon them in a quick short term. If customers are confused by something, you can put up a sign that clarifies the things that you're confused. It's not hard, right? If customers are frustrated by you not taking a certain type of payment, you may be able to call up your payment provider and add it for a small fee, So understanding what these points of pain are so that you can prioritize them and effort rank them. Because, you might find things that you say, wow, that's a huge undertaking. But sometimes if it's an app, you can reword the text of a button, or you can, add an additional explanatory video, or you can just change the sequence of steps in a checkout process, and you can massively reduce confusion and frustration. And so really what we like to do is look at a combination of metrics, things like Google Analytics or Omniture reports, looking at for example, someone moving through a checkout funnel. But, if you look at something like that, it's super valuable. But if it shows you that, of everybody who puts items in your cart of your shopping site, let's say, and then clicks checkout, of all those people, let's say 40% wind up checking out and paying you money and, finishing the order, and 60% don't. Okay, well, that's important to know. 60% of the people on the website, and this is common, by the way, start the checkout process and never finish. So that suggests an opportunity both for more revenue, and also at least it's reasonable to hypothesize that those people wanted to buy something and something got in their way and they didn't, and that may also be reducing their satisfaction. But what? Why? Why did this happen? Usually the reports aren't going to tell you that. They just tell you what happened. Observational analysis can help you understand why. Now you're starting to watch customers who are at that moment of checking out, and they're like, okay, I'm going to buy this, click. And then they go to check out, and then they try to enter their promo code, and it keeps getting rejected, and they don't understand why. Or they can't figure out how to move from one step of the checkout process to the next. Or they see the terms and conditions, and they get freaked out and worried that you're asking for their firstborn child, or whatever. But we don't know what until we start to do that kind of observation. And once we do, sometimes it's like, oh, eureka, we can fix this. We can make this better. And it may seem like an obvious thing that I'm describing, but I can tell you that a shocking number of companies simply aren't engaging in a regular process of looking for these thorns that are existing in their customer experience and trying to figure out, how they can file them down and make the process smoother. We get brought in to do that kind of work all the time. And, once in a while, somebody's done it recently and it's in good shape. But otherwise, we can almost always, no matter how major of a brand it is, find things that can be fixed quickly and easily. And picking up on what you said earlier, sometimes this is the highest return on investment work that you can do, higher even than the transformation. Because you may be spending $100 million on that transformation. Are you going to get $1 billion of value back in the next 2 years? I mean, you'd like to think so, but it might not be that way. We've done optimization projects where the client spent $100,000 and increased their sales by $5 million a year. It's because sometimes these things are just not expensive to address once you know what they are. In fact, sometimes you spend more money figuring out what they are. And once you know what they are, they can be, like I said before, just rewording something, adding some clearer explanatory text, that sort of thing.
I think it's important as well for organizations to recognize that actually these quick wins, I mean, you referred to it as low-hanging fruit before, these quick wins actually are very, not just positive in terms of the commercial outcome and the positive gains to the business, but actually to the people that are involved in the broader, larger transformation. They're seeing the benefits of actually what's a new way of working, isn't it, really? I mean, they're starting to look at things iteratively and differently and introducing these new ways of working.
It's super important because one of the biggest risks that large, ambitious transformations face is loss of faith. You start down a road of investing in something. Your team's been working on it for 6 months or 9 months or a year, and you haven't gotten rich yet. Like you haven't seen the big return yet. And then something can happen. The company can have a bad quarter, or a new executive can come in and say, "How much have we spent on this? What kind of results are we getting? This is ridiculous." Cut the cost, let it go to the bottom line. And lots of great transformations that were on their way to success get cut off at the knees because there's just not the patience and the persistence to persevere to the value at the other end. It's not a complete solution to that problem, but it really helps if you can say, look, we haven't completed the major technology upgrades we're working on, so we're not seeing the big value yet, but look at these small things we've done. Here's where a place where we just did, we spent $300,000 and we're already seeing millions of dollars of improvement. This creates confidence that this team and that this process is actually able to give a return on investment. And of course, reasonable business people understand that some return takes longer than others. If I'm going to build a new factory and I start working on building the new factory and I lay the foundation and I start to put up the beams and we've been constructing it for a month and someone comes along and says, "How much money has that new factory made for me yet?" Well, none, duh. It's not finished. We've invested in it. So of course, there's a reasonable understanding of that. But like I say, people can get impatient. And also they can't always see the progress the way you can see it in something like a physical construction. So that's another thing, by the way, that's important, is to demonstrate visible progress over time. So that just like if you were looking at a factory being constructed, you can kind of see, an executive can kind of see, oh, I see, it's not done. We're not making any product in that factory yet, but I can walk the construction site and see where my money is going. But of course, that combined with being able to show some smaller improvements that are already in the market and bringing in money, these are powerful methods to help bridge that time period, increase patience to get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Brilliant, brilliant. And finally, I'd like to talk about step 5 on your roadmap, which is about leading the change. And I thought it was really interesting how you'd left this till last in the book. I'd like to quote actually directly from the book because it's such a poignant statement. And there's a section in here where you said here, for all this gloom and doom about disagreements and resistance, transformational change absolutely can and does happen. It happens when a leader inspires teams across an organization, aligns them around a clear vision, gets the resources and political support to make it happen, and then anticipates and proactively strategizes how to avoid the potholes along the way. And then we sort of move into this chapter about sort of leading the change. And in the book, you talk about having, and I love this phrase, an innovation hero. And because of all the businesses I've consulted with and for, and where I've been searching for that hero, I really totally understand the point that champion of change is so high on the agenda to find. But my question on this is, look, why is it so important to have that innovation hero?
It's the same reason why if you want to lead an army of troops into battle where they could very well get killed, it's very helpful to have an inspiring leader, because innovation, transformation, these are risky undertakings. And people, it's less risky to stay home, it's less risky, or it seems that way in the moment. People often have, the human psychology is often favors the short term over the long term, right? That's why we eat 2 pieces of pie at dinner, even though we're trying to lose weight, because, the short term pleasure is something that, believe me, I do this too. The short term pleasure feels in that moment like it outweighs the long term goal that you have. And so with transformation, sometimes it can feel like there's a lot of short term pain, inconvenience, et cetera, for something that's maybe a longer term goal. And so somebody has to help you. Somebody has to be your, kind of like having a great weight loss coach who keeps you focused on, guys, this is where we're headed. People follow certainty. I've observed that many times in my career, because when things are uncertain, people are nervous and often they don't follow through. And so they need somebody to give them the certainty that they may not have. That's what a great leader does. It's not the only thing they do, but it's one of those where they stand up there and say, we will do this. We can succeed. We will succeed. This is where we're going, and we're all going to work together at this, because it's worth it if you're going to succeed. It's not worth it if you're going to fail, right? Might as well just eat the pieces of pie if you're going to gain weight anyway. But if you knew that if you did everything right, you would have the body that you want, or you would get the business that you want, you'd be much more likely to deal with the short-term pain. And so a great leader reminds you of where you're going and why it's going to be worth it, and convinces you that you can do it and that the team can do it and that we have the resources, we have the support. We've done it before. In the book, I go into many different leadership themes, the kind of thing that if you were going to get up at a meeting and give a speech, you might want to refer to that couple of pages in the book to say, what are things you can say as a leader to help persuade people that they have a reason to believe in success? And that can be particularly important, by the way, when projects are at a moment of challenge, because most transformations hit the rocks numerous times. And some go down after they hit the rocks, and others patch up the boat and keep going. But those are especially the moments when you need to be able to say to the troops and to the executives and to everybody, to remind them why we're doing this, to remind them that innovation and transformation involves risk and involves some degree of failure, but it won't be a failure if we keep moving forward. And here's the reward, and here's why we should believe we can do it.
And what would be the sort of main characteristics that you would be advising to people watching and listening to this podcast in finding that innovation hero? Is it somebody sometimes that's in the business? Do you go externally? What are the key characteristics that people are looking for?
It's funny. I mean, in the book, there's a somewhat tongue-in-cheek diagram of a superhero, right? Yeah. And I talk about the different aspects that an innovation hero should have. But it does require courage. There's no question, because people in these roles often get fired. You have to be willing to not value your job over the mission that you're trying to achieve. Hopefully, people like this are also very valuable. So if they put their job on the line and get fired, they'll just turn around and get another job. But you need somebody who's got the courage and is willing to put it on the line, because that's the certainty that people need to see. You need people who can speak in different languages. Not if you're a global organization, it might be helpful if someone can speak French and Spanish and Russian and whatnot, but that's not what I mean. I mean, they need to be able to speak the language of business, like what I was doing earlier: revenue, profit, investment, capital versus operating expenses. They need to be able to speak the language of customer experience and research. How do we create a great experience for a customer? And they need to be able to speak to technology people, because technology is, of course, a key enabler behind most digital transformation. And there's other domains they need to bridge as well, the language of marketing. So you have to have that ability to talk to many, many groups. And you have to have a certain humility as well, because no leader can do it all. This is a team sport. And just think of all of the different types of roles and experience that are necessary to drive successful digital businesses, from the legal department to the finance department to the marketing department, and on and on and on. So you need somebody who, is generous and who's looking to create opportunities for everybody to participate in something successful. Not somebody who's just looking to be seen as taking all the credit. And there's a great quote. I think it's Harry Truman. I think I might be wrong about that. Who said, it's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit. And I think that mindset is essential in a transformation leader.
It most definitely is, and what you just touched on there about the broad skill set of the sort of leadership person and that sort of hero is what's been referred to before as skill stacking. It's my belief that the great C-suites of the future, even of today, but of the future, the great transformation leaders are actually ones that have a very broad set of skills, not necessarily specialized in a particular area, but they've got a very broad set of skills that have been stacked up so that they're able to communicate across a broad number of business units, in order to bring people together.
Yeah, I think that's right. Sometimes people talk about the idea of, T-shaped skills, right? Somebody who has depth in one area, but understands enough about all these other areas. And I think that's another way of saying that you need to speak those languages, but nobody can get it all. Nobody can be deep in every area. I mean, I think Michelangelo, right, was the ultimate Renaissance man. They said he understood everything there was to know about science, but that was, 500 years ago. Today, you could never understand everything from how to make a computer chip to how to design a great website to how to build a great digital business to how to use Facebook ad marketing. I mean, there's just too many things. Nobody's got that many hours in a day or a lifetime. So you need to be able to speak to people in all these different areas and then have them see that their leadership and their talents are welcome and that they're going to be heroes too. Ultimately, the most popular superhero movies are not the Spider-Man movies or the Iron Man movies. They're the Avengers movies. They're the movies when teams of superheroes come together to accomplish something even bigger. And so ultimately, the ultimate transformation superhero is the one who actually assembles a team of superheroes with different areas of expertise and specialization. Aquaman can talk to the fish and Spider-Man can spin his webs and whatever. Well, within your team of heroes as well, you're going to have one that's a technology hero, and you're going to have one that's a marketing hero, and one that's an operations hero, and one that's and so on and so on. And when you've got that, and you've built, the Avengers or the League of Superheroes, depending on whether you're a Marvel or a DC fan, now you've really got a force to be reckoned with that can tackle the very sizable challenge of transforming a large company.
Howard, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. Thank you very, very much for joining me. There's so much quality there in the content that you've shared today. If people watching or listening this would like to perhaps maybe reach out to you or gain access to your books, so where's the best place for them to go?
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. And if you want to learn more about the book, you can find the book. It's available pretty much anywhere you like to buy books, probably, certainly on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Apple Books, digitally or traditionally, hardcover. In addition, if you want to learn more about the book, you can go to the book website, which is at winningdigitalcustomers.com, just all one word, winningdigitalcustomers.com. You can download the first chapter of the book for free there, as well as have links to where you can purchase it in a variety of different, formats. And if you want to learn more about my consulting and digital agency company, you can go to from.digital. I also have a podcast called Winning Digital Customers. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I do a live cast twice a week and publish a lot of content there as well. You can just look for my name, Howard Tiersky.
Brilliant. Howard, as I said before, it's been a pleasure. And just to second that, I would highly recommend getting a copy of this book. It's a great read. Somebody equally that's been in the industry a long time. There's a lot of stuff in there that would be highly beneficial. So I would highly recommend it. Howard, thanks once again.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.